out, but it's not on my end. It's just because it was transferring to going live, I think.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited for this conversation that we're going to have. So today is the today's International Non-Binary Peoples Day, and so we are hosting an intergenerational panel. I'm so excited. This is also going to be on Metro's podcast, Inclusivity and Beyond. This is also hosted by Metro Inclusive Health, our local LGBTQ plus focused community and health center in the Tampa Bay area, where all are welcome. So thank you everyone for joining us today as we speak to non-binary people across generations. My name is Prin and my pronouns are they, them, and I'm the founder and facilitator of Outside the Binary Peer Support Group. And I'm so excited for the conversation we're going to have tonight. Before we get started, I do want to share the disclaimer that none of us can fully, wholly represent the amazing diversity of the non-binary community. We can only represent our own experiences. So if you're watching this, let this be a start or a step on your journey of learning about and understanding the non-binary community, but definitely don't let it be the end. So thank you everyone for coming and joining on this panel. We're just gonna kick it off with our first question. If you would love to please introduce yourself to us, let us know who you are, what you do, and what you're passionate about. We will go ahead and start with Ez, if that's all right.
Cool. Thanks, Prin. Hey, everybody out there. My name is Ez Rodriguez. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. And my day job is working with Equality Florida. I'm the Pinellas Safe and Healthy Schools coordinator. I've actually taken on 7 new districts, so my expanding role is like rolling out, and we're going to see what that means. But I'm really excited to stay with Equality Florida. I met Prin through Equality Florida, so really excited about that. What else am I supposed to say? What I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about dismantling systems that keep people in boxes or force people to be in boxes. I'm passionate about taking care of all of our LGBTQ youth, staff, and families in our schools, in our public schools. And I really like football. I like soccer and football, USA football too. Like NFL stuff. So yeah, I'm a weird like Peyton Manning fan. My dog's name is Peyton. So yeah, you can just go from there. Yeah, and I'm excited to be a non-binary person on this call where everybody's pronouns are they, them, because I always feel like the weirdo in the room. And now for the first time in my entire adult life, feel like I'm in a room with people who are like me. And that just feels good. It's okay to be in a room with other people whose pronouns are different, but this is pretty cool. So thanks for inviting me, Prin.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for all of that. And I definitely agree. That's a big part of why I started Outside the Binary, because the first time I was able to be in a room full of non-binary people just felt so empowering and uplifting, and I wanted to bring that space to others. So I'm so happy that you are feeling that way tonight with us. Let's see. Arlo, would you like to go next?
Yes. Hello. Arlo is my name. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm an educator and a consultant who works with businesses, families, churches, nonprofits to just kind of expand their understanding and competency oftentimes of surrounding gender and identity. a lot of my work is very foundational, like as was saying, working on deconstructing ideas and concepts and preconceived notions is a huge part of all kind of pervades throughout my work. A large topic that I teach on is gender creative or gender open parenting, which is very tied to a lot of dismantling social stuff that we, are into. As far as my personal life, I'm a huge plant papa, and I have 2 wives and 3 children that fill up a lot of my time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here, Arlo. And Tamir, would you like to go next?
Hi, my name is Tamir Pouts. I'm age 71. I've been retired since age 56. I was at one time a college librarian, and then I was a postal clerk for the U.S. Postal Service in Miami. My passions are my dog, warm weather, being in water like at the beach, palm trees, beauty in nature, camping, kayaking. And when I get a chance, I'm kind of an activist for gender liberation and equality for everybody and justice. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here and for joining us while you're camping. That's so amazing. And I'm so grateful that you're here.
Thank you.
And let's see, that was so cool. The little comment popped up. Thank you so much for that comment, Marnie. Marnie thanked everyone for participating. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into these questions. If anyone in the audience has a question, feel free to type it in the chat and we will make sure to address that towards the end. So first question, let's talk about what does non-binary mean to you and what language or terms do you use to identify yourself or to describe yourself? Would anybody like to go first?
I'm happy to go first. So like, as far as the way I am willing to use non-binary in mainstream vernacular versus the real depth of its usage are very different things. I think in day-to-day society, people have started to become normalizing using it, but kind of just as this big third gender category, like man, woman, and well, just non-binary, just other, versus it really being a concept more than like a noun. It's the idea that there are genders that exist outside of this binary. And that's what we call that concept, rather than it having to be just a new category with its own parameters and definitions and limitations, which is why there's so many identities that fit within that. I myself don't have a gender, but I still have to use the word, choose to use the word non-binary as a way to reference myself when talking to people, because it's where the verbiage kind of is right now. But under that, like, I prefer to say that I'm like gender void or agender. Jokingly, but not jokingly, my gender is nope. So that's how I would prefer to use, my words.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And I completely agree with your point that non-binary should not be this third gender box that we can check off or another box that confines us. If anybody wants to speak more to that, I will definitely let you do that.
I can talk a little bit about that. I feel like I fit possibly in the middle of generational stuff going on because Mixed Tamir said that they were, kind of 70 and stuff. So I kind of like feel like I'm in the middle. I feel like when I was, a young person, people used pronouns for me that didn't feel good. So I thought there was only one other option. So I tried those pronouns and they were closer, but not quite right. So when I found my they, them pronouns, I was like, hey, guess what? I get pronouns too. Yay, So I don't think of it as a third gender either. I think it's home. I finally found home for me. And I want other people to be able to find home for them. So I think what Arlo said, what they said was amazing. And I think that, you know, we all have this string that ties us together in a certain way. And I feel like what Arlo said was like home for them. And I feel like that's home for me. And, you know, we're all under this umbrella, and I love my community. So that's what that means to me.
That was so beautifully worded. Thank you so much. Tamir, would you like to share?
Yes, I have a simple definition that non-binary means not 100% male or female in your gender identity. And that covers an infinite number of variations, so everybody's different. But I personally feel there's some third gender energy that I identify with. I don't mean it as a box that other people have to fit in, but it's something that I feel.
Yes, that completely makes sense. And thank you so much for sharing that. I definitely can relate to what all of you have said. One word that I love to use to describe what non-binary means to me is that it means freedom. It means freedom of choice, freedom not to be restricted by any kind of gender stereotypes. I can choose to do whatever makes me feel whole and comfortable. And so, yeah, thank you all so much for sharing. Next, I would love to know about how each of you came to terms with your gender identity, and if there were any signs throughout your life, maybe what were those signs? That's always fun to talk about. Anyone can feel free to kick us off.
All right, I can go. So after my, she, her pronouns don't fit, and he, him pronouns closer but don't fit. I'm a very artistic person. I paint and I do lots of different like art. I've done, theater arts for a long time. So drag actually got me into thinking about my gender, because I knew something was off, but I didn't know quite what it was. And when I started to do drag as a drag queen, I figured it out. I really like to perform heightened femininities on stage that had no bearing on my life as a person walking around the street. But it really helped me and the community. I moved here to Florida from Minneapolis, and a lot of my friends and drag community helped me figure out who I was, and what I wanted to be. So that's how I came to terms with being non-binary. Now, I will say that there were some people in the drag community that didn't understand it back in 2002, 2003. They were like, well, wait a minute. If you were assigned this at birth, you can't do this. Well, I exist, so I'm right here in front of you. So it took a lot. It took a lot of tears. It took a lot of things. And then I married my art. I married myself, my identity. And I said, I'm going to do this. And things worked out real well. So I dedicate my life now to creating spaces with and for other people who feel like they don't have spaces.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. I love that you were able to find a form of expression like that, and a form of expression that also comes with a big sense of community, which is amazing. Tamir, would you like to go next?
Yes. When I transitioned, which was starting in 2007, there was no term, no non-binary being applied as far as gender goes. And I was going to a lot of transgender conferences and support groups, and there were only 3 categories that they talked about: cross-dressers, which are usually male to female heterosexual cross-dressers, and FTMs, female to male, and male to female MTFs. And I figured, well, if I'm already a female and I don't feel comfortable, that was how I was assigned at birth, but I'm not comfortable with it, well, then I have to be an FTM. But I would see the FTMs who were very, very stereotypically masculine. And I was totally turned off because I like feminine things. So I felt more in common with the MTFs, the male to female transgender people. But I did meet someone there who was a feminine FTM, and I identified with that because I found out you could be male and be feminine or anything you wanted to be. It gave me the permission to start on hormones when I realized this. As I say, the word non-binary didn't exist back then. I just figured, well, I'll be a femme male, or after I pass the gatekeepers, because we have gatekeepers, more back then than now, much more back then. I don't know if I could transition if I tell them I'm not really male, but after I've finished my transition, if I don't feel male, I'll do my own thing and be whatever I want to be.
Thank you so much for speaking to that. I think that is such an important point. Like, so many trans people have had a similar experience, and I am so hopeful that we can change that for the future generations of trans people, that we don't feel forced to confine ourselves to masculine or feminine stereotypes in order to access the transition materials that we choose. Awesome. Arlo, would you like to go next?
Of course. So I think it's really interesting that, someone else talked about how performance was part of their discovery, because it was actually, I used to do burlesque, and changing my persona from Minerva Quintrell into Fella Girly was this whole thing. And suddenly I was able to, like, in a very comedy burlesque way, like, play with androgyny and gender fuckery and make, like, take burlesque and intentionally queer that type of performance. And that was like really the turning point of actualizing, from like going from thinking, oh wait, this gender stuff in my head, to actually living it. And that was a really good outlet. But it was for years before that, huge indicators. Like when I was in high school, I turned to my best friend, who was, the one gay guy in high school, and I was the one queer kid in high school. And of course we're best friends. And I say, if gender neutral was an option, I would be that. But since it's not, I guess I'm just cis. Okay, whatever. And it just took me like another, 7 years or whatever to meet someone who, when hearing me talk about my opinions about identity and how I saw myself, they were like, oh, so you're non-binary. And I was like, I'm what now? and that took me into a deep Tumblr dive. And the second I heard the term, I was like, oh, yes, yeah, okay, that. And for me, there was a period of rejecting femininity, which I think is really common for those of us who are forcibly socialized within it. In that I felt like to be viewed as non-binary or trans, or viewed as someone who was going through a gender experience, I had to change my external presentation, almost sometimes more than I wanted to. Through pushing myself, I was able to find things that I did enjoy that I maybe otherwise wouldn't have. But at the end of the day, there's not a masculine drop in my bucket. And I don't identify with the word. I don't identify with, and even when I do or act in ways that people say are masculine, it's not an expression of my masculinity because I don't have any. And it took me kind of moving through masculinity and to find that out. So
I love that so much. You touched on so many wonderful things, especially like the things that make me feel masculine, other people read as feminine. So I totally relate. And it looks like Ez also relates.
Exactly. Thank you, Arlo, for sharing that. And thanks, Prin, for bringing that up. I'm going to be really vulnerable right now. I'm having a problem with my hair. I'm half Latin and half white, and to have long hair is a thing in half of who I am. And men have long hair too, who are cisgender men assigned male at birth. But I feel like when I have long hair, people more misgender me, but I like the feeling of feeling my hair. So I'm just going through this like really weird thing because I've had short hair and I love how it looks, but I like having long hair as a non-binary person, but it makes me misgendered, you know, for people outside of me, like how the world interacts with me. So I'm like, oh, should I just cut my hair? So I love that Arlo brought that up, and Prin, thank you for highlighting that too, because these are real issues that people have. I mean, I'm a more masculine person, but I like to feel my hair, so I don't know how to deal with this sometimes.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Ez. And I think that's something that we don't really talk about a lot, is like a lot of times dysphoria can come from how society is perceiving us rather than internally within us. If we are not being seen the way that we see ourselves, it can cause a lot of like mental turmoil. And I think that sounds like what you're experiencing when you have your long hair and feel so good and confident and masculine. And then other people see you and like, oh, that's a femme person. And it's like, what do you mean? And I relate because I feel like more masculine when my hair is longer too. I think it's so funny because most people don't see it that way. I don't know if it'll help. Maybe do an undercut, do a little shave side.
In my own way, I actually relate to the hair thing too, because like I actually, as part of my journey, have taken my hair out of the equation. Like for part of my social, spiritual relationship with myself right now is that I'm wrapping in my hair in public because, like you, I found so many difficult conflictions on how to manifest and be seen how I wanted to be seen. So like totally twinkle finger feel you on that.
Yeah, go ahead, Tamir.
I've had an issue with hair too, because during the pandemic, I did what a lot of people did. I stopped shaving. And for the first time, I grew a beard. And I figured, well, nobody is going to ever misgender me as a ma'am again when this pandemic is over. Of course, I had to cover it up with mask for over a year. And I was called ma'am over and over and over. And I suffered so badly from gender dysphoria that I spent $500 on masks, different masks that were clear, that showed more of my face, hopefully more of my beard. But then I also was growing my hair. And to my surprise, when I took off the mask, I've been called ma'am sometimes, even with the beard. So I'm trying to do something different with my hair, and definitely from the back, they're going to call me ma'am because it's longer. Now I had it cut a little shorter, and I may still have to get it cut shorter because the dysphoria of being called ma'am is probably worse than having to cut my hair. So
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I really think it's amazing how much we have to alter our gender expressions for society to see us. And I hate that we are struggling with that, but hopefully that can change as we have more of these conversations.
Prin, I want to give a shout out. I have friends who are Black, and Black hair is different than people who don't have hair that are Black people, right? So I know a lot of people who are trans and non-binary who have Black hair, and they struggle as well with hair expression. I just wanted to put that out there. I'm not a Black person, but I wanted to represent for my friends. And if anybody has questions about that, I'm sure we could have a person come in and talk about that.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing light to that. I definitely think it's important. And I am definitely heartbroken that we don't have a Black person of color joining us today. Unfortunately, they were sick. But we will definitely have more conversations like this because it is so needed, and there's no way you can get a group of 4 or 5 people and be able to represent the whole of the community. So we will do our best. Awesome. All right, let's jump ahead to the next question. And well, actually, I feel like we touched on that a little bit. In what ways have you experienced society enforcing gender roles and norms? I know we talked a little bit about that, but I don't know if anybody wanted to touch more on that. Yeah, go ahead, Tamir.
Well, most people tend to believe that there are only 2 genders, and you're either a lady or a gentleman, or you're a ma'am or a sir, or a he or a she, and they don't believe there's anything in between or other. They don't know about intersex, and they don't know about non-binary people. And they also believe they can tell your gender by looking at you, which is a problem. Like, if I'm called ma'am and I say I'm not a ma'am or a she, then automatically they will go, oh, he, sir. There's only one other option. And they will look at you to try to figure out why they made their mistake, as if you could see gender, when gender identity is really invisible. And people don't realize that in the mainstream of society.
That's so true. I really don't believe that when we're walking down the street, when we used to walk down the street and pass people, just by looking at them, you cannot guess how they see their own gender. And I think that's something really beautiful about our community because we are so diverse. Arlo, would you like to add on to that conversation at all?
Well, I mean, I think this will also get answered a little more down the road, but like a lot of where I see society enforcing norms and roles is through parenting and through socialization of children, and that like watching that programming happen with the like now knowledge of how gender and identity works is sometimes daunting. And just like in the playground, you have those moments where, you see a person yell at their kid, don't cry, be a man. And you just want to step in and be like, no, stop. And it's so hard because like, there are those moments that are that's it happening in real time. And that's what people end up in adulthood having to reparent themselves and unlearn to find themselves.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Like you said, a lot of our interactions with young people are kind of like not ours, but society's interactions with young people are kind of like trying to fit them into this like nice little gendered box. And like if they stray, at least from what I've seen, like a lot of kids will get bullied at school or beat up. To try to force them back into their little gender box. I'm sure, Ez, you probably know a lot about that with the work that you do.
Yes, thanks, Prin. Definitely. I think that it's interesting to think about. I mean, I have a fur baby. I don't have a human baby. I'm Maddie, so I'm a little bit mommy, a little bit daddy. I think that there's not a lot of space for children to just be. I think that, in schools, like what I see is people saying, hello, girls and boys, or whatever, instead of hello, mathematicians, hello, artists. Like there are a lot of ways to be inclusive of everyone, especially before people know who they are, right? Because experience and growth makes us understand who we are. So I think that it's really important, as an aside note to parenting, to be a good ally to young people, to say, what do you need? How do you feel? Who are you? Who knows? What do you need me to do for you? That's some of the work that I do in our schools, and try to help other administrators, student services staff, educators, PTA folks, it's hard to not know what to say, right? So that's what I try to do, is just to say, you know, why don't you step into somebody else's shoes, and what would you need if you were in this situation, right? So I'd like to try to explain or give some sort of a slide in my presentation that shows what non-binary feels to me. You know, so for kids, like, they're like, I don't know how to talk about it. But so I put 2 sets of shoes in my slide, and I say, okay, these shoes are the flippers that people wear when they're diving, but there's a big stiletto heel on the back. And then these other shoes are some canoe shoes they look like canoes, and they're wooden. And any human being could not fit their feet into any of these shoes and feel comfortable in them, right? So I try to like say, being non-binary is like being forced to choose between these 2 sets of shoes. And that can help you when you're looking at young people in the world, right? Of being non-binary, saying like, oh, well, you know, they don't fit in any of those shoes, so they can look for their own shoes, right? So yeah, I mean, I just think that it's interesting to work with young people who are non-binary, especially being an older non-binary person. Did I say older? Oh my gosh, I'm dating myself. But I think it's really interesting, and it's important to form a social context and language where people can feel seen and heard. Our young people can feel seen and heard. A lot of older people, older like myself, are coming out. Like Sam Smith came out. Who's the singer that just came out?
Demi Lovato.
Demi Lovato, right? Like, when we have context to talk about language and identity, then people are like, oh, well, yeah. And in 10 years, everyone will know at least 10 people who use they, them pronouns, or who are non-binary and use other pronouns or they, them pronouns, right? So I just feel like we're on this precipice of talking about these things. And it's really, really important to give space for people and have grace for people to move into spaces. Even if y'all as an audience, people out there who are listening, if you're like, I don't even know what that means or how that feels, that's okay, because no one knows how anybody else feels, and that's okay. But we can all respect and value each other. So yeah, sorry, I went on a little tangent, but I'm just
don't be
so
sorry.
excited to be here. So in my space and my time to talk.
Don't be sorry. That was so amazing. And I'm glad you shared your example with the shoes, because I think that's really helpful for people to conceptualize it that way. Wonderful. Oh, there's so much. Okay, well, let us hop into the next question related to parenting. So if you have human children, what has your experience been as a non-binary parent or grandparent? Or if you plan to have children, how might being non-binary shape your parenting? So I would love to throw this to Arlo first.
Yeah, so being a parent and non-binary is burdening your children with being an advocate from the beginning. There's no way about it. My children have, anytime we go to the playground, is that your mom or your dad? Wait, you don't have a mom, how were you born? You know, those sort of like very well-meaning questions that can sting when asked over and over and over again to an 8 or a 10-year-old. And like, being a non-binary parent means that your children don't see their families in media. It means that they don't see parent-child relationships that resemble theirs in books or in cartoons or in movies. And it has to be intentional, where like we go out of our way to support like LGBT publishing companies that make quality content, for children that have parents that look like me or like my spouse that uses Maddie, because children sense that absence, and they feel the pressure to fit in, and it's very heavy. It's very heavy. And it's not to say that people shouldn't be non-binary and parents, because I also think it comes with huge gifts in that, like, I am walking the walk, not just talking the talk of, telling my children to be their true self, to find their authenticity, to be proud of who they are, to, all of these really core values that we hope our children will have. I get to just live every day by being a non-binary person, and they get to see that. But it definitely comes with its own challenges. And for me, when I had my first child, I did not realize I was non-binary yet. I didn't have that language. And I fell into the precipice of just motherhood and the social narrative for motherhood, and how it felt like a wool sweater. It was just like in a hot summer day, it itched to wear it. And I actually thought I was struggling with postpartum depression or something, because being called mom made me want to throw up in my mouth. And then finally, when my child was like 3, that's when I learned about non-binary, and I was able to say, oh, okay, that's what all of that was. But at 3, my kid instantly picked it up. They were calling me Papa by their own, decision. Like my co-parents were calling me Parent Arlo. And so Papa is short for parent, even though some dads are called that. It's actually gender neutral to my kids. And so it's just very, their kids are adaptable. Kids will grow, they will absorb any information, and they're so non-judgmental, especially when they're young, that if you're just, this is just, I used to go by that name and now I go by this name. And, you used to call me this, but now I'd really like if you could call me that. And kids just roll with it. And I think if someone is worried about their coming out harming their children or impacting their children or something like that, I would definitely say you will do more benefit for your children to be your happiest self, to be your truest self, and that there are lessons about authenticity that you just can't teach if you're not, if you aren't embracing yourself.
I love that so much, and I could just listen to you talk about being a non-binary parent for hours. Thank you so much for sharing. Tamir, would you like to say anything?
I never really wanted any kids, so I can't speak to that. I have a dog, and I have used my experience with the dog to practice they and them. The dog is fine with that.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Alice, would you like to add anything?
I also mentioned that I have a fur baby, but I also think that being around children is, I think it's a gift to be gender neutral and let kids be who they are. So thank you to Arlo for sharing about parenting. And I think in our schools, one really important thing is to not have forms that say mother and father. They should say parent 1/guardian, parent 2/guardian, parent 3/guardian, because kids come from all different kinds of families. So Arlo, thank you for highlighting that. And I suppose that's all I have to say about that.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So our next question, what does a non-binary person look like? So many times when non-binary people come out, they're faced with this, you don't look non-binary, you can't be non-binary. So please, someone enlighten me. What do we look like?
Everyone looks non-binary. Everyone,
I love
everybody
that.
looks non-binary. We all look non-binary. Like
Yes.
whether we are or not is not the case, but we all could be, from whatever our appearance is. And I really like that most of the non-binary people I know present in a way that might look binary. Whether they might look like a binary trans or binary cis person, but they present in ways that aren't. In society, it's one of those, if you're not like a exactly beautiful, androgynous, skinny, white Tumblr model, then you're just not non-binary. And as, a skinny, white, non-binary person, I can say I'm not the only look. Like, I have had people be critical of me and say, well, you're perpetuating the idea that everyone has to look like you. And I'm like, I'm sorry, this is how I woke up.
How could you look like that?
Yeah, but I do understand how not everyone does and how that is hard. Non-binary people are fat. Non-binary people are Black. Non-binary people are disabled. Non-binary people are tall and have hair on their faces and on their chests. And, you know, non-binary people have deep voices and high voices, and like everyone.
Amazing. I don't know if anyone can say it any better than that, but if anyone wants to try, please be my guest. Or we could just move on to the next question.
Aplausos. That means big clap.
Yeah, go ahead, Tamir.
Any gender can look any way. I mean, a man can be totally feminine and a woman can be totally masculine. It's not just non-binary that can look any way they want. However, the problem is if you don't want to be misgendered, then there are you to form to what the stereotype of such and such is. In my case, before the pandemic, I was happy confusing people. I don't ever use language like this, but my presentation was basically gender F, skirts and a beard and stuff like that. And I like that. To me, it says I'm neither, to confuse people. So hopefully I won't get called either ma'am or sir. Yes, it's very fine and brave to present in a binary way and be non-binary, but for me, I wanted to be visibly non-binary. But with the pandemic, when I had to hide the one thing that made a difference, usually in how I was gendered, my beard, under a mask, I gave up on my skirts and I gave up on they and them. I just said to myself, as long as people don't call me ma'am, I'm not going to complain. As long as it's not she, I'll take sir, I'll take he. And I started dressing in masculine clothes again. Now with the mask off, hopefully I'll feel a little freer, but I've only tried it once since the mask came off.
Yeah, I am definitely hoping that you can explore some more gender effery. I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Tamir. All right. And just kind of to piggyback off of that, can non-binary people transition? Do non-binary people transition? What might that look like? Arlo, would you like to start us off?
My perspective comes from someone who has been out as non-binary for almost a decade and did not start anything that resembled medical transition until under 2 years ago. So I spent like 6+ years just sitting with myself and feeling like I had what would be a transition, in that it was a transition of my state of mind. It was a transition of my relationship with myself. It was a transition with my role in my community, in my culture, in society. But it didn't drastically physically change. I added some boxer briefs. I got a haircut. I called it a day, and that was good for me for a really long time. And I didn't want to rush into medical transition because I didn't want to think that I was doing it for just the social approval or because it was just the kind of the transition escalator, so to speak, of just, well, this is the next step. And when I finally started hormones and when I finally had top surgery, I didn't feel like I was further in my transition. I didn't feel like I had transitioned more than before I had these interventions. So I would say that non-binary people transition the same way everyone transitions, including cisgender people, because our relationship with our gender is ever evolving and ever changing. It doesn't matter if you're trans or cis. What made you feel affirmed when you were 5 years old is not what affirms you now. And as such, everyone has transitioned in their gender.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because I feel like as trans people, we are much more aware of that, but cisgender people are doing it. They're just not thinking about it. Ez, would you like to say anything next?
Sure. Yeah. I think that I'll echo what Arlo said, and they're on point for how I feel. We're all in conversation with our bodies as we live, right? I have had different conversations with my body when I was younger, and I'm having different conversations now with my body. That is an intimate relationship that I have with myself. I think that all people have it, cis, trans, or agender folks. And I think it's amazing to let yourself have those conversations, because when we can become aware of where we are situated in ourselves, that's when we can create space with and for other people, right? And I say with and for because I don't say for. I definitely like to create space with other people for what they need. Yet I don't think that I had that skill before I allowed myself, I'm very bad at self-care. I will say that. But before I could have that conversation with myself, I couldn't have a conversation with other people and about what they needed and supported them, to be in support of them. So that's what I'm working on as a middle-aged non-binary person. And I'm proud of it, and I'm happy about it. And I know more today than I did yesterday, so I'm excited.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Ez. Tamir, would you like to go next?
Yes, I started my transition in kind of an unusual way. I had a legal name change with a male first name and a female middle name to show a sense of gender mixedness. And I didn't know at that point if I would ever do anything else medically. I figured, well, at least my name looks different than I look physically. I mean, I still look female, but I had a male first name. But, to me, that was the gender ambiguity that I wanted to convey. Later on, I did the standard FTM, what most trans men do. I did that transition medically about 6 months later. And I felt at that time I was kind of doing what I was supposed to do if you're an FTM. Like, I had people criticize me for carrying a pink umbrella. And I said, well, I like pink. There were stereotypes that you were supposed to fit in if you were going to be a man. Like, I wore a shirt with ruffles, a man's shirt, but it had this purple and had ruffles down the middle and on the cuffs. I was criticized for that. That's not something men wear. And it took me several years, really, at least, to have the courage to stop wearing stereotypical men's things and go back to trying out the feminine things that I liked before.
Prin, can I comment on Tamir's what they just said? Number one, you were probably wearing an amazing 70s tuxedo button-down shirt, which, woo, I love them, okay? Number two, fashion changes over the timelines that we don't even know about. So we think that blue is for boys and pink is for girls now, if you're going to a baby shower and they're expecting a boy or expecting a girl, right? But if you go back previous to 1950, it was flipped. And little girls wore blue and little boys wore pink, because pink is a diminutive color of red. And they used to send soldiers to war from Europe in red uniforms, right? And then it changed after that. And if you go back to the 17 and 1800s, all babies were white regardless of gender. So it's interesting that you talk about fashion and how people put you down for wearing certain things, where I would think that what you just described was a very masculine thing, but people were like, oh, well, this and that, and that's more feminine or whatever with ruffles or whatever. And it's just so interesting how fashion and color and design changes over our lifetimes, and even things that we don't know There's a great book called Sex and Suits, if anyone's interested in like looking at the chronology of fashion and stuff over the last 200 years in the United States. So thank you for bringing that up. And I just wanted to talk about that because a lot of times people are like, yeah, pink for girls and blue for boys. Well, it's not always been that way.
I really appreciate that history, because I think there's so many people who don't know. Tamir, did you want to say more?
Yes, I know that in certain countries it's just the opposite. Blue is feminine and pink is masculine. But I live in a retirement community, and they don't know those things, and they're not thinking about other cultures. They have one idea of how it's been since they grew up in America, which is a stereotype, of course.
Yeah, so thank you so much. We are going to have to wrap up soon, unfortunately, but I want to make sure that we answer any audience questions that we get.
There's a great question in there, Prin. May I take this?
Please.
And have our other guests, if they'd like
to.
So Eric is asking about they, them pronouns, because a lot of people say that that's a plural pronoun. So if you go back to Shakespearean English, it was they and thou for formal and informal singular. So it's actually a singular pronoun from back in the day. And a lot of people say, I wonder if someone left their cell phone. I wonder if they're going to come back and get it. We assume the cell phone belongs to one person. So we're always using they, them as a singular. It's just really shifting our mentality around it when we're using it as a singular for a personal pronoun. Yeah, correctness has nothing to do with it because, I mean, if you want to argue with Shakespeare, go ahead, right? Amazing question, Eric. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
I'd love to build on that and say that, yeah, we have huge historic and linguistic and academic precedent for they, them being used as a singular pronoun. So if we're just going on, argument of correct, like you said, who's going to argue with Shakespeare? But furthermore, language is used by us. We are not used by language. So language changes how we need. Language changes to our understanding. So to tell someone that's a plural pronoun so you can't use it is saying that language is static and unchanging, which is not how language works. And also it's putting definitions or maybe some sort of technicality above real human comfort, real human need, and real human lived experience, which is just petty and cruel. So anyone who argues about the pronouns being correct, I don't want to tell them that they're wrong because pronouns are correct. I want to tell them they're wrong because they're being cruel.
Clap, 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 clap. Thank you so much for saying that. I'm a language geek. I used to teach language in Spanish and English. So I do fall back on that sometimes. And thank you for bringing us up to speed on that. Yes. And we can also think about pronouns and people changing their name. Like if anyone in the audience has known someone as like, oh, I know Maria and her last name used to be Smith, but she decided to take her partner's name when they got married. And now she's Maria Gomez, right? I have to practice because I don't know her last name as Gomez. I used to know her as Smith, but I practice, right? And as Arlo is saying, like language does evolve with people, right? And that's how that's how little children learn, right? We practice and we repeat and we repeat. So thank you so much for bringing that up. I mean, I just want to give everyone hugs on this.
Tamir, go ahead, Tamir.
They have added the singular they to the Merriam-Oxford Dictionary a few years ago. So it's okay. And a lot of people don't realize that you used to be strictly plural many, many years ago. And now we say you to a single person. And we don't even know that it was only plural years ago, that a singular was thou back then. So I hope in many, many years from now, it'll be the same with they.
Yes, I hope so too. I would love, if we have time, to ask you one final closing question about how do you feel about the future for non-binary people in Florida and in the US?
I'm really excited that the federal government recently has announced that they are going to be moving towards having an X marker on passports, because that is a federal document. And it is very common for state documentation to follow suit with federal rules. Like when when Obama said that federally, like, you could change your gender marker without having to have proof of surgery, you just needed a doctor's note. The same year, Florida changed that as well to make it that you just needed a doctor's note. So I'm hoping that this is an indicator that our state, along with other states, are going to start adapting that X marker, which would be really cool for people in our state to have that. And I would love to see that marker used by everyone, not just non-binary people. In general, though, I think it's going to be a slow and steady chipping away at the more conservative atmospheres that are here in Florida, but I continuously see progress in that, and I think I will continue to.
Thank you so much for that input. Go ahead, Tamir.
Sometimes I think that we'll have to go to the Supreme Court the same way same-sex marriage did, because some of the states, especially in the South, I don't know if they would have same-sex marriage even now if it hadn't gone to the Supreme Court.
Hey, I want to offer something to close. Being someone who has lived in the North, I mean, I grew up in Mexico for 9 years too, but mostly in northern US states. When I came down here, people said conservative and liberal. I like to say supportive and unsupportive, because that takes all politics out of things. You either support people or you don't. So I think that's a really something that's useful to bridge, gaps between people. I think that Florida is a state that's ever changing. I think that there are many people here from all different places. This is one of the most diverse states in the United States. And I have a lot of hope for Florida. And when I first moved down here, because my partner is from Florida, North Miami originally, I was like, where am I going? And I've actually met some of the most incredible, forward-thinking, amazing people down here. So I have a lot of hope for the state of Florida and our country as well. So I think that we can all be who we are and take care of each other and respect each other, even if we don't understand each other.
Thank you for those amazing words. I really appreciate that. And with that, I guess we will close out. I really love this conversation. I wish we could talk for so much longer because there's so much to talk about. Outside the Binary meets 4 times a month online. If anybody wants to hop in the conversation there and continue the conversation there. Yeah, and other than that, I just want to thank you, all 3 of you, again for being here. This was so incredible, and I'm very grateful. And thank you for everyone in the audience for joining us and spending some time learning about the non-binary community. I appreciate it. Have a great night, everyone.